This is the labor black mobilization to stop the Klan. Everyone, come out to stop the KKK who plans to march down Constitution Avenue near the Capitol. Be where the Klan says they're going to start their march. Be at 1st Street Northwest and Constitution Avenue, 10 a.m. this Saturday. Remember Greensboro, where they murdered 5 anti-Klan militants in broad daylight and got off scot-free. All out to stop the KKK. Be at 1st Street Northwest and Constitution Avenue, 10 a.m. this Saturday.
Glad to see some forces here today that's determined that the KKK and their ruling class backers are going to see not that 1925 march that they want to recall, that they want to repeat on the same exact route. See, because that's what they want. 40,000 hooded robed Klansmen walking down these streets and begin to actively terrorize the population here, the black people, the working people, the poor here. And what we're saying here today is that they're not going to rise. You see, because the fact is that the American ruling class have made a decision. Reagan has made a decision that they're going to march, even if it's over our bodies. Some of them are talking that language. And what we have to understand is that there's a strategy to defeat them. See, when you mobilize the working class in this country along with other minorities, you can defeat these race hate terrorists. And when you don't do that, when you do other silly, absurd things like call on Reagan to ban them, like organizations like the Communist Party and others do, then of course you help allow something like this to happen, because you're putting it in the hands of this very racist capitalist government that's responsible for this setup today, with heavy police presence that's promised here in order to intimidate people here. That you shouldn't be out on the streets. You should be home with your blinds down.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Spart Talk. You have just heard a clip from Spartacist history. It's from an anti-Klan mobilization in Washington, D.C. on the 27th of November, 1982. In Reagan's America, where a Spartacist-initiated United Front rally mobilized roughly 5,000 people from up and down the East Coast, but centrally from Washington, which at the time had a 75 to 80% black population. This effort ran off the Klan and was a real show of strength of labor and black power in the fight against racist, fascist terror, which was growing under Reagan. Some 40-odd years later, life for the black masses hasn't much improved. In fact, under Trump 2.0, the black masses have a target on their backs. From the war on DEI to relentless police brutality, unemployment and poverty, racial oppression and racial segregation continue to define the experience of the black population of this country. Yet where is the struggle? Forget struggle which is based on the masses, struggle rooted in defiance of the two capitalist parties, but there's nothing obvious. Our comrades in the United States have been emphasizing for years now the need to rebuild the black struggle from the bottom up. So the purpose of this episode is to grapple with this question. And we're going to do so by getting into this historical experience. We're going to talk about the anti-Klan mobilization efforts, situate them in their political context, look at the obstacles to building this mobilization and the lessons, and impart these to a new generation of fighters for black and working class freedom. And I will also say that this is not just an American discussion. Looking at the growing wave of racist attacks against minorities in Britain, or the recent attack by fascist Hindu nationalist goons against students in Jadavpur University in Kolkata in India, the struggle against fascistic terror and reaction is on the political agenda, and its urgency grows daily. So this discussion has a broader relevance as well. Now, to take up this tall order, I'm really pleased to welcome two historic leaders of our party, two dogged Spartacists whose work and dedication and relentless energy is an inspiration to us all. I'm joined by Comrade Don A., longtime party leader and spokesman, organizer of numerous United Front mass labor black mobilizations against fascists, and founding member of Labor Black Leagues for Social Defense, and Comrade Jean Herson, Labor Coordinator for Partisan Defense Committee and Spartacist League initiated Labor Black Mobilizations, and founder of Militant Oppositional Caucus in the National Maritime Union. Welcome to you both, comrades.
Thank you. Cool.
Now, I can't possibly do justice to everything you've done in an introduction, but I want to start our discussion off by asking you both to tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, why and how you became a communist, what shaped you. I want to do that to give our listeners a sense of who's actually speaking to them to impart these lessons of history. So I want to start with you, Don, to tell us about yourself.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I grew up in a working class neighborhood in San Bernardino, California. My family my mother and fathers were from the South. My early years, however, I lived in a railroad town. My father was a railroad worker, but I don't have time to get into that. But one thing I remember is that he had white and Mexican railroad workers over at our house, and they used to have long discussions about everything. Anyway, when I was about 15 years old, I was in high school. I would guess I was a good student. I studied a lot and I participated in sports. But in 1965, when the Watts Rebellion happened, and Watts is a section of Black Los Angeles then, it was a powerful eruption of Black anger at ghetto conditions of entrenched poverty and racist police brutality for generations, and just inferior segregated education, so forth and so on. I wasn't political then, but when I saw it, it became real when my cousin Peter, who lived in Los Angeles, and I lived in San Bernardino, about an hour outside of Los Angeles, when he came down to our house in San Bernardino, and he told my mother, he said, look, and his aunt, he says, look, Auntie, look what the police, LA police did to me. He pulled off his shirt. And I haven't never seen the biggest bruises in my life. And he started sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And that really deeply affected me. And I think that's when I started really paying attention to what was going on around me.
Mm.
I started listening to these different Black radicals, and I was actually, some of them were pseudo radicals.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the way forward. And the thing about Watts was that I found out about was the role of some of these people like Martin Luther King. He actually agreed that brutal cop repression was necessary to put down that uprising.
Mm-hmm.
Nation of Islam used to mock him with a cartoon that said, if any blood should be shed, let it be ours.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I was becoming socially conscious and aware. My sister, who unfortunately recently died through medical neglect 3 months ago, she was the first one that told me anything about a Black militant that I should know about. She came in suddenly into the living room one day and said, there's a Black man named Malcolm X who tells off white people, who cusses out white people. And I didn't know what to make of it. But anyway, Malcolm X was somebody that I started listening to, and I didn't know much about him. The thing is that the period of the birth of the civil rights of the Black Power movement was just down the road as a result of the collapse of the liberal-led civil rights movement. One of the groups that I was attracted to was, of course, the Black Panther Party. They were bold advocates of armed self-defense against racist cop terror. They were for armed patrols. Cops were brutalizing Black people in different neighborhoods all over the country. And, they were young, courageous guys, and women who actually were the backbone of that party. A lot of the memoirs of the Black Panther Party told by people that were in it make the point that the women was actually the backbone in terms of organizing a lot of stuff. But anyway, I was also a college student about 18 years old. I won't go on and on, but I saw these white radicals on campus, my first year freshman. They were arguing vociferously, and I came up and I started just leaning in and listening to them. And what were they arguing about? They were arguing partly about the Vietnam War and how to fight it. But what they were really arguing about is who and what was the revolutionary groups in France during the 1968 uprising in France. Pre-revolutionary situation. So I said, damn, they were really passionate, and so I started reading. I got introduced to communist literature on campus. I was a student. joined the Young Workers, the Che Lumumba Club down in Los Angeles in 1968. I met a guy named Carl Woods. He became part of their steel fraction many years later in the Midwest. He came up to me during a demonstration. He says, "Hey, my name is Carl." He was white. He said, "My name is Carl Wood. I'm a communist. What do you think about that?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know much about it. Why don't you tell me about it?" And so I admired his fervor and his knowledge. He was a serious young man. And so, yeah, I joined the Che Lumumba Club. And then later on, I was one of the founders of the Young Workers Liberation League in Chicago in the winter of 1968. I stayed with them a brief period of time. I saw that they didn't want to overthrow capitalism. Later on, I joined the Socialist Workers' Party and the Young Socialist Alliance for about a year and a half. And I didn't stay there long either, because when the women of the Young Socialist Alliance branch in Riverside, California, when they revolted against the SWP, Social Workers' Party, ostensible Trotskyist, so-called Trotskyist group, when they dropped the line of free abortion on demand and raised the demand instead of rescind all anti-abortion laws in order to snuggle up to the bourgeois feminists of the National Organization of Women now, the women led the revolt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the axe came down on the branch. And we were basically witch hunted out of it. And we went to the one last attempt in 1971 Houston Convention to try to find our way to what was known as the proletarian orientation tendency, but they were so bureaucratically cowed that we couldn't find them. Now, I'll be brief about the SWP. I came to the party after I decided that the SWP was not it, and they wanted Black people to be the Black revolutionaries, basically to build nationalists, build a nationalist organization. They call it a Black political party. And if I wanted to be in a Black nationalist organization, I would have joined the Panthers. And I met the Spartacist League in the Bay Area in 1974. I joined in 75. They were the only group that would argue with me. They wanted to find out what I understood by revolutionary integrationism, because I had read the literature of the party before I joined. First, I didn't want to read it because they had the pamphlet called For Materialist Conception of the Negro Question. And I said, these are some old footies. Negro, we ain't Negroes. And I bought the copy anyway, and I've read it. So anyway, I joined the party in 75. And I could say a lot about that, but I was really impressed with our attempt to fight for revolutionary integrationism, link the struggle for Black freedom to the fight for workers against the exploitation of workers.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very exciting history. We could talk for hours about each of those turning points, but I appreciate you letting us.
I'll go on too much, but that was.
No, definitely very interesting. I want to turn to Eugene and give us your spiel.
Well, I was born on a farm in southern Jersey. My folks had moved out from New York. They were in the Socialist Workers' Party, the Trotskyist Party at the time, right after the fight with the Shachtmanites. And they had gotten disillusioned of the possibilities of a working class revolution. I would describe my father as a Dowdist, sort of a Deutscherite. And he basically would talk about the virtues of socialism, but how it's kind of an impossible thing and so on. So it was kind of discouraging. But at the same time, I was exposed to a lot of liberal ideas and the fight for Black liberation. They would bring folk music into the house, everything from Ledbetter to, the Almanac Singers and Pete Seeger and the rest of that. Meanwhile, I was sort of as a youth exposed to the abject poverty of just farmers in general being squeezed between marketeers and between debtors and banks. And at the same time, casual workers, most of them were Black. There were some beginning to come in from Puerto Rico. But I was, as a kid, very shocked to sometimes visit a Black friend and find the conditions that they lived under. And that made a mark on me for the rest of my life. But as time went on, I had gone on to college and in college participated in some of the civil rights groups and some of the anti-war groups that were on the campus. And I was still pretty much a liberal, and there were the illusions in what could be changed. There was the beginning of the Vietnam War. There was the killings in the South of many civil rights workers, and it became clear that this was not going to work to me. Of continually trying piecemeal and putting good officials into government. My last, I think, mistake, because partly through the beginning was the Johnson Humphrey, and then as they spoke more and more, I realized that there's no way that Democrats or Republicans were going to change things. And I started realizing why there was a need for working class struggle. And at a certain point, I had a chance to go to sea for the summer. A friend had a connection with the union, and I was able to go to sea. And at the end of the summer, I was given the choice of going back to school. And at this point, I wasn't sure. I was studying to be a veterinarian, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And having even traveled on the ship and seeing abject poverty in countries throughout the Caribbean and South America, I decided that I wanted to really fight against these injustices and disgusting oppression around the world. And I decided that I could either go back to school, get a profession, and then, retire and see the world, or I could fight for what I really wanted to, and I could see the world now. So I decided to do that. And the National Maritime Union was one of the founding CIO unions, basically founded by the Stalinists, the State Communist Party. But there were many different leftists in there. So the people I sailed with, and it was sort of a twilight of the last of the seamen that built the union. So you had the Communist Party, you had various factions of the Socialist Workers' Party. There were Cochranites, and there were Shachtmanites, and there were Cannonites in there. And then there were also Social Democrats in the union, and Wobblies, the old Wobblies. So I was really getting to hear it from people that were engaged in class struggle. And one of the hallmarks of the National Maritime Union was that it broke from the AFL tradition as a CIO union as a totally integrated union, which was quite a thing, because on ships you live together, you sleep together, you work together day after day. And I found that so impressive to be on crews that had blacks and whites, Latinos, and people from all over the world. And I saw also the power of labor. And as I participated in more union activities, I started realizing how the bureaucracy was actually shafting the membership and selling out deals and making soft deals. The president of the union was barely there, sailing on a sailboat he was given by the United States line after negotiations. And I decided to join in with an existing opposition that had formed. And that was the other motivation to leave school, was because as I read more and more, I was reading more Lenin, I was reading Marx, I was reading Trotsky, and I was reading also some of the civil rights movement people that had a big influence on me, Malcolm X and Robert F. Williams, who wrote Negroes with Guns. And I realized that this was really to combine the struggle of blacks and whites. My union experience just confirmed that whole perspective. But I was not yet really a communist. But as I worked with the opposition, I was young and idealistic, and I said, well, the head of it was a guy named Jim Morrissey, and it was called the Committee for NMU Democracy. I said, well, we should all break up and go to the West Coast and go to the Gulf and go to the lakes and build this movement. They said, okay, go ahead. So, that's how dedicated they were. So being young and naive, I said, okay, I'm ready for it. I went out to the West Coast and I started handing out his material, and I got threatened by the bureaucracy quite a few times, but I ignored that, and there was a big reception to it. And then I realized that the key things is more than just union democracy, that there was the war in Vietnam, which was being used to smash unions and workers. And then there was also the black struggle was going on, and police brutality notorious all over Oakland and in San Francisco, the formation of the Black Panther Party at the very time that I was out there, the shooting of Huey Newton. So I decided that I would write up, I told Jim Morrissey, well, why don't, I'll put out a newspaper like the West Coast Committee for NMU Democracy, and it will show people it's not a one-man show, and will show how democratic we are. So I wrote 3 articles, one on why the war is being used against workers in this country and against the Seamen's Union, especially when we sailed to Vietnam, and I had a few trips to Vietnam, and we were being cheated out of our bombing bonus pay. And I said, so the war is being used against labor, and it's against the people in Vietnam who we shouldn't be attacking anyway. And then I wrote another piece about the need for the fight for Black liberation and defend the Black Panther Party. And the third article was on the need for, I called it a labor party at the time, the need for a labor party based on the trade unions. Well, Morrissey said, I don't think this is going to work. This was way beyond where he wanted to go. And he said, I think we ought to hold off on it. I said, well, it's already written, and I got a bunch of guys I already organized to participate in the committee. So I said, I'll see what they said. Everybody wanted these articles, and they also had written articles for the planned West Coast newspaper. So we brought out our paper, the Beacon, and we named our group the NMU Militant Solidarity Caucus. I should back up. While I was at school, I had met Spartacists, but I was not yet ready to commit, and I was committed to doing union work. And when I went to the West Coast, I reconnected with the Spartacists, the very people that I had been at college with. And the comrades pressed me for why to do work in the unions, you have to be in a party. And having read Lenin on what is to be done, I realized, and left-wing communism, I realized that this really was the only way to work. So then that's when I joined the Spartacist League. And since then, I've participated in a lot of union organizing for the Spartacist League and doing union work and United Front defense work, such as mobilizing trade unions in the fight against the fascists in this country, the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis.
Wow, that's a lot. It's always really, really cool to hear about the histories of the older comrades. I just grew up in the 90s. It's boring. Nothing exciting. Okay, anyways, so listen, the clips I played at the start, that was a snippet from our famous 1982 DC anti-Klan rally. Now, I want to take that as a bit of the starting point for our discussion because of what it represented politically, the potential of labor Black mobilizations. But I want to get into that by first talking about the period, because both of you, as you've explained, were, you became politicized in the 60s in the heyday of, 68 France and the Vietnam War and all of these things. But here we are at the late 70s and early 80s. And then there's the KKK planning marches to the nation's capital. So what happened in this country that things turned and things got so bad that we're having to organize anti-fascist mobilizations? I don't necessarily want to go into the whole outcome of the civil rights movement, but I do want to give our listeners, especially our younger listeners, some context for what was happening in that period in which these mobilizations took part. Maybe, Don, you want to start with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the early 70s was the period that the bourgeoisie, just after the ghetto uprising, revolts, rebellion, installed a layer of Black Democratic Party politicians around the country to keep the lid on the ghettos in places like Cleveland and Detroit and, I don't know, many other cities. And especially was noteworthy in Detroit. Coleman Young was an ex-Communist Party and union organizer, came to power at first Black mayor in that city in 73. At any rate, they were put into place to help enforce austerity. The U.S. economy was increasingly shaky, and you had the oil crisis in the late 70s and stuff. And I don't know if you remember, but you had I don't want to go into it, but you couldn't get gas when you wanted to get gas.
Yeah.
And it was under Carter. When he came into office, he made it quite clear that his program was one of racist reaction and quote unquote human rights imperialism. And the oil crisis resulted into a increased loss of wages for workers. Inflation was going up and up. And I remember in particular that about the time the late 70s came, at the end of the late 70s, there was a big co-worker strike in 1978. Lasted about a year, right? About a year. It was militant, very defiant. And I know that when Reagan came in office the year later, after Carter, because people were fed up with him, Reagan come in office, he said, all gloves are off. All gloves are off. He was going to show the welfare mothers, the workers, where their places lie, which is to say, get back on their knees. And so the air traffic controllers, a predominantly white PATCO union, what was called a professional air traffic controllers union, went out on strike. 10,000 of them were fired. Most of them voted Republicans, largely white, by Reagan. This was throwing down the gauntlet to the entire labor movement. And there was a deep sentiment during that period of time to fight.
Mm-hmm.
The comrades here, we went to a huge demonstration. We really tried to rally opposition. We wanted those airport workers to get their jobs back, and the Air Force would be shut down. And we went to a 500,000 strong Solidarity Day demonstration in Washington, D.C., with a headline called "Shut Down the Airports." We're pulling all of the working class to back their brothers in that union, because hardly any women in air traffic controls. And we were the ones that was fighting for the machinists union to go out, because that was the union that could have really stopped the planes from being serviced, right? Who was the head of that union? Willie Wispinger. He was a DSAer. And that's really was crucial in knifing that strike. But in D.C., when that 500,000 workers came out, our headline was like lightning. And personally, I might just mention it, but one story was that I was a little nervous because these white workers from Virginia, they're from the coal field. They came up to me, and we all were instructed to say we have a labor socialist paper. Yeah, well, they came up to me and said, What kind of paper is that? I said, it's labor socialist paper. They said, is that a communist paper? I said, yes, a communist paper. Give me one of those papers. And they started taking our papers and started buying them. So that was one issue. PATCO was just like a turning point for the labor movement. Subsequently, after that, the bourgeoisie went on the offensive. Factory closures after factory closures, with the connivance, of course, of the reactionary pro-imperialist trade union bureaucracy. Now, Gene, you take it away. You got memories of that period.
Well, Carter really set the tone because people were really being driven down. Don mentioned the oil crisis and the wages. I mean, when he ran for office, people saw which way the wind would blow, because one of his campaign things, which he thought would be popular, was based on ethnic purity, which everybody knew what it really meant. And the thing that was the hallmark of Reagan taking over was there was tremendous dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party. And meanwhile, there was also the whole Iran mess, where Iran had taken U.S. hostages, and you had the whole Iranian revolution that took place. So Carter was completely washed up, and people were fed up with Democrats. And when Reagan came in, he made it clear that it was going to be war on labor. And the thing about him going after PATCO is that PATCO was one of the few unions that actually supported him. And he made it a point to personally sign the papers to smash PATCO. So that was a declaration of war on the working class in this country. And that was what inspired attacks that were going on in the country. And that inspired the Greensboro massacre. I mean, they felt like they had the wind in their sails in this kind of a period. Now, I mean, Don had made a point in one of his speeches, and the Anti-Klan mobilization, that they didn't have the right strategy, the Communist Workers' Party,
In
of
Greensboro.
fighting the Klan. They were kind of confrontationist and didn't build the support they should have, but they were dedicated and they meant well and they were very sincere. But they were not gunned down on the basis of a Klan vendetta. They were gunned down because they were against the racist rioting and the terrorism of the Ku Klux Klan. So they were trade union organizers. There were civil rights leaders amongst them. 5 of them gunned down with the connivance of the Klan with the police directly. And then in the end, the charges were all dropped. So it was clear to the whole country how the capitalist state, the bourgeoisie, the cops work, and the courts work hand in glove with the fascists. And the fascists act as front men and bullies for the state. So Greensboro laid bare the nature of how capitalism works and how they use fascists to be their front men to do the dirty work of how capitalists want to repress labor and workers.
I'm really glad you explained Greensboro because that sets the tone for what the party sought to do. You know, it became a need to provide a strategy to the masses for how to actually confront the KKK and defeat the KKK. So I think that's an important turning point. I do want to pick up on just what you said, that it laid bare the nature of capitalism for the society. I mean, what was the popular reaction to Greensboro amongst the Black masses? Like, what was the state of the movement at the time?
Well, I can mention that in Detroit, people were following it very keenly because the Klan said they were going to celebrate the massacre in Detroit. And I was in Detroit local as Spartacist League during that time. And I remember when it happened, like we were all like, we had like a little social at a comrade's house and we had the television on. And all of a sudden we see these pictures of these guys in plain clothes, you know, getting out of their cars with shotguns and stuff. And they were, and at a rally organized by the Communist Working Party, and start shooting them down. And
This was televised?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they went after the leadership. Most of the wounds they saw was in the heads. They went after the leadership. Now, when they tried to organize in Detroit, we knew we had to do something. And we had supporters in the auto industries in Fort River Rouge, which then was a massive facility out in Dearborn, Michigan, near Detroit. And then we had supporters in the Chrysler plant. Our supporters in the Fort River Rouge plant got their local. One of the key officials in that local, I think he may have been the president, Hank Wilson, endorsed and said to some of the workers, well, it's all right, my union is. Leadership said, you know, not necessarily he's going to be there, but it's okay, right? Regardless, the workers that came to that labor Black mobilization were very determined to make sure the Klan was not going to be on the streets. So it took leadership from our party and organizing in a short period of time. The number of leaflets was like in the thousands. It was during Thanksgiving Day, like weekend. And we got pushback from the city administration of Coleman Young. Their judges, their federal judges, called us into their offices and try to tell us to call our rally off, and we stood them down and told them in so many words that if they didn't go ahead and arrest us. So, but what we did to build, and I can't go into all of the details of it, but like Comrade Gene just said, we learned some stuff then, you know, about how to motivate why it was in the interest of the entire working class, including white workers, and some of whom came out. You know, they had a material interest in fighting against the fascists and for Black rights.
Gene, where were you in the Greensboro period?
Oh, I was in New York at the time.
So what was the public reaction?
People on the left that already were fighting for justice and fighting against racism and the civil rights movement and so on, they were aghast, but that it was so brazen because nobody had lived. I mean, it was in the memory of some of us, Emmett Till and some of the horrible things that happened. Okay, that's in the Deep South and so on. And it was an individual, you know, the story of different people that had been lynched and horrible stories in the South. But this was something that was so brazen and such a militarily organized thing. And Don described the footage that was on TV, that you have to see it to actually know how chilling it is, because in a very cold-blooded way, they actually slowly, not rush, got out of their cars, calmly, escorted by a police car, took their guns.
That neighborhoods.
Huh?
The police.
Yeah, they escorted the Klansmen. The Klansmen drove in 3 cars, escorted by the police. And then they calmly got out of their cars and took their guns out of the trunks of the cars, took aim at the leaders. They knew exactly who
And
they
the
wanted to
police
hit.
watched.
And the police just stood there and then escorted them out. And then a few stayed behind to, supposedly get medical help or something. But so it laid bare to the whole country how this actually works.
Mm-hmm.
So people that were not leftists were all aghast at this. Mm-hmm. And this was extremely shocking to the country.
And can I interject one point about the liberals who said that this was a fight, a shootout between extremists?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was their line, right?
Yeah.
And certainly Detroit was deeply felt, but a lot of people were from the South.
Yeah. In fact, there were, I think, 17 to 19 people injured in Greensboro, and some of them were in jail after this whole incident. They were jailed because the liberals want them. Oh, there's 2 extremist ideologies and whatever, So it's mad. It's mad. I do want to say, look, we can talk about this for hours, but as you mentioned, Don, so there was the mobilization we did in Detroit. And then because the Klan had said that it was going to march in Detroit to celebrate Greensboro or something like that. And then after that, we did a number of other efforts. In San Francisco, the Nazis wanted to celebrate Hitler's birthday in April 1980.
Yeah.
Then there was Ann Arbor, Michigan, where another fascist group called the SS Action Group, they also planned to march. So we were, this was not a one-off thing. The Klan was emboldened and was marching in different parts of the country. So all of this leads us to DC, because the Klan at that point, so this is 27th of November, 1982. This is the big one where the Klan it's gotten to this point. So Greensboro happens in 79. And you have 80, 81, and this is November 1982, and they're marching on the nation's capital, which is no small thing. Mm-hmm. And Reagan's in the White House. So let's get into it. What exactly were the circumstances in which this march was announced, and what do we do?
Well, because they thought they had the blessings of Reagan, which they did, because a lot of his supporters, and in fact, they had supported Reagan, and it was totally accepted to have his support. It was never denounced. So this was going to be on the anniversary of a huge Klan march in Washington, D.C. I think it was 20,000 or something.
There was 40,000. Pardon? In 25?
Yeah.
In 1925, yeah. So in 1925, the Klan had marched in D.C.
Yeah. So, and there were like 40,000 or something. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to supposedly resurrect that. They thought the wind was in their sails, all these series of things, Greensboro, the Reagan presidency. So they, and there was also a lot of dissatisfaction in the working class. And there were many people that were fed up with what capitalism was dishing out to them. So there were a lot of people drifting towards right-wing. So they thought the season was ripe, and they claimed that they were going to have 200 people. It turns out they had like 12, or maybe 20. And they were pretty pathetic human material, to tell you the truth. I mean, these were not Proud Boys or anything that was strapping. Not to belittle, how dangerous they could be, because these people can aspire, horrible things. But that's what they announced that they wanted to do. And we said, this is not going to happen, because it would be so inspiring for so many right-wingers and fascists in this country, and people that wanted to brutalize blacks and immigrants and so on. So we said, we got to do this, and we started planning on it. But the one thing that we knew we needed to take on Washington, D.C. was we needed a labor component. And we had one person, and this is a lesson about how, if even right up to a revolutionary situation, how one incidental thing can lead to very big things. But at that demonstration, the big Solidarity Day that took place in 1981 that Don was talking about, when the AFL-CIO mobilized
post Patco
for Patco and had 500,000 people in D.C., we had met a shipyard worker from Norfolk whose name was Hawk. And I remember the comrade, Gloria, had sold him a subscription. And we had kept up contact with him. So we thought, maybe this is somebody to reach out to. And he had corresponded with us a great deal. And so I was selected along with Comrade Ed Cartson, who was a Black comrade who was a leader in the Transit Workers Union and ran for office for the Spartacist League in New York for borough president of Manhattan. So he and I were going to go down to Norfolk and the Tidewater area and see if we could get people. And I remember that we got into the elevator in our building and were heading down, and Jim, chairman of the party at the time, said, well, no pressure on you guys, but if we don't get a labor component for this demonstration, it's all off.
Yeah.
So Ed and I looked at each other, sweating in the elevator going down, heading out to the airport. Okay, it's all on us.
Yeah.
So we got down there and we met with Hawk immediately. And Hawk, we had called him. He was waiting for us. He took us to the president of his local. Hawk was in the Norfolk Naval Shipyard. And it's kind of tricky because they're in a naval shipyard. So, how do you start with people that are in a precarious situation? But he didn't seem to be bothered. He said, we're going to do this. And Hawk is quite a character. I'm not going to take time to show you how he stood up against a lot of white racist foremen as a shop steward and as the treasurer of his IBEW local. And he met us and took us to his president, and they agreed they're on. So we knew we had at least one union local. I'm not going to take time, but I realized we kind of need to have some way to solidify this, and we hadn't thought about this. So I went to a motel and asked the nice lady behind the counter if I could use a typewriter, and I typed up an endorsement form and used her Xerox machine. And Ed was standing there like, this is never going to happen. But anyway, we got the endorsement forms. We went back to the president, and we had Hawk and the president sign them. And then Hawk said, well, let's go to the other IBW local. He did the electronics local. We went to the regular electricians IBW local. We got them signed up. And then we went to the painters union. We went to the riggers union and the scalers union. And one by one, if most of them signed, and one of the things that we do is we distinguish between individuals signing in their own capacity, but yet use the name of their labor organization so that they won't get in trouble with their labor organization. So we had either unions sign on, or a president would say, I can sign for my union, or else they signed as the leading official, a president or a vice president or chief stewards. So we ended up with two IBW locals, Painters Union, the IAM. Then we branched out to the Hotel and Restaurant Workers Union, and we started gathering more and more of these. By this time, this was before emails, and I was faxing these into the center into New York. And then once we had these 4 or 5 unions, it was a go, and every local in the country started signing up, and we were committed to making this happen. And then I thought we had enough, and I went over to the Longshoremen's Union, to the ILA Local 1248, and the local president was very skeptical, and he's a very professional kind of guy. And for those who don't know, the ILA is not a liberal union. The ILA is possibly not only one of the most powerful labor organizations in this country, but it also is one of the most right-wing organizations in this country. Nonetheless, Black locals in the South know who fought for Black freedom, who fought in the civil rights movement, and they were willing to go independently, if not in defiance of the powers that be in their union. And the main concern that the president had was if there was going to be any trouble, he did not want his name to be besmirched. So I said, we're going to have a disciplined democratic demonstration. And that became how we described our demonstrations, that it was going to be militant, disciplined, and democratic. And he felt very reassured by that. And I think our comrade Charles Dubois was with me at that point. Ed had to come back to New York to organize in New York. Charles Dubois came in and traveled. We traveled together. Then we went to the Short Shoremen's local, ILA. We got a second ILA local. At that point, I was wondering, go for broke. So I called New York and I spoke to George Crawford, party secretary, and we mused about asking the international president of the ILA, and which is really like shooting for the stars, but we decided we'd give it a try. So, because it would unlock every local in the South of the ILA. We knew through the grapevine that there was a tradition that Teddy Gleason, the president, was always in his office at 6 o'clock in the morning, because 6 o'clock in the morning is when the job calls happen and the dispatches happen in every ILA local hall. And as an old-time trade unionist, unlike today, where they mostly are fat sacks who sleep in, come in at their convenience, he was old guard, and he was a bureaucrat, but he came in at 6 in the morning. So I went there at 6 o'clock in the morning. There was nobody in the office. I knocked on the glass door, and a guy who looked like he was a lineman for a NFL football team came to the door, and he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to talk to Mr. Gleason about stopping the Ku Klux Klan and busting unions in this country." He says, "Hold on a minute." So he goes lumbering down the hall, goes into an office, comes lumbering back and says, "Come on in." Oh, and I slipped our leaflet in through the glass door crack, and he took it in. And I figured, I guess I'm going down the stairs or something. And he came back and said, "Come on in." So I go in, and there's Teddy Gleason sitting by himself in his office, eating from a regular Greek cardboard coffee cup, like any worker in the city, reading the daily news. And I said, "I don't know, Mr. Gleason, if you read this leaflet." He says, "I did." I said, "The Klan wants to march in Washington, D.C. They already talked about Greensboro, talked about what they want to do to the unions, the whole history of what the Klan has done to blacks, to the trade unions in this country, to picket lines. And I guess I don't have to tell you about what they do to Catholics and other people from other countries, immigrants." And he said, "It cannot happen. This cannot happen." And I said, "Would you endorse this demonstration?" And he said, "Yes." And I gave him an endorsement form, and he signed, trying not to perspire. Anyway, so I left the office, and I thanked him, and I gave him a couple of pieces of our paper. I gave him the Workers' Vanguard, and I gave him one of our other flyers, and I thanked him, and I left. And from then on, we were able to get a lot of other locals and many other, it just unlocked the whole thing. And that was the key thing, because if you didn't have the trade unions, most of these unions were predominantly, if not largely, Black working class. It was the example of Black labor power in this country. So this was sort of a lesson. And all of this started with the sale to a particular worker, and it unlocked everything for this key demonstration.
Okay, this was a United Front demonstration. I assume we approached the left as well, and Black organizations.
Yeah, I remember we did approach a few organizations. I remember we made sure that the NAACP knew about it. They had a big chapter there. They weren't interested. I think they said they were going to write a letter or something to They didn't do anything. There was not many, Black organizations that were doing much in D.C. at that time. The mayor was a former civil rights activist, Marion Barry.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, no, I don't want to get on board. I'm going to be out of town. I'll be in Los Angeles and stuff. And then another influential preacher named Walter Fauntleroy spent the day of the rally trying to divert people by promising a free hot dog day at some park in D.C. The churches were not, rarely we were able to get churches involved, except for in Chicago in '82.
Chicago was June 82.
Yeah.
The gay pride. They
yeah,
wanted to
gay
march
pride.
on
I was
Pride.
going to march, and Bernard ended up speaking in the Jesse Jackson Church. But anyway, I remember getting some endorsements from like the postal workers in D.C. But there were not many Black organizations to be found.
Mm-hmm.
Because, at that period in time, the Black movement had already reached a standstill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like, this was the Reagan years.
Mm-hmm.
And the defeatism had set in. And, the Panthers had split 10 years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, there wasn't much really to tap into. We worked the campuses, Howard University, the Black University.
Mm-hmm.
We had worked that very heavily. And I was going to mention the United Front, just make a general point. It was not original. Actually, we learned it from the Bolshevik Party,
Right.
when the Bolsheviks decided as a party to wage a fight militarily, if possible necessary, to defend the Kerensky government against General Kornilov in order to lay the basis later on to systematically prepare for the overthrow of the Kerensky provisional government. Those, march separately, but what's how you say it?
March separately, strike together.
Yeah, I forget all this. You guys got it right. So, and that's what we did. I mean, we tried to get, as many forces as possible, the students and Black organizations. I say didn't exist. The Black leadership was, he was an ex-civil rights Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
You would expect that he might want to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But they were administering cutbacks in programs, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they take the leadership of the party. They took that because you're going to go up against the capital state. You're going to go up against the press. You're going to have to deal with the left, reformist opponents.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll come back to this theme, what Jim Robertson said, that if you don't have labor, it's not going to happen.
Well, that was central, yeah.
Right, that's central. I mean, for you guys, it's obvious.
Yeah.
For us, it's obvious, but that's not obvious out there, outside the walls of our building.
It may not be obvious, but guess what? Who's the majority of the population?
It's working class. But why do you need the majority of the population to defeat the fascists?
Yeah, well, they have an interest in it because these fascists' ultimate target is the labor movement.
Yeah.
Black people and all the intended victims are Black people, immigrants, Jews. They wanted to rally against the immigrants.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting, or what I find interesting about this conversation is that, here we are in 2026, and some of these arguments are really hard to make out there.
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of other liberal politics and strategies to fight fascistic attacks. So some of it is just like, let's go confront them on the street. And that's not new. I know you guys confronted that as well. The other is, let's just ignore them, because if we ignore them, we're on the higher moral ground. You know what I mean? So what were the different sort of strategies on offer to fight the Klan? What did you guys actually confront? Yeah.
Well, I mean, once you had some kind of a momentum going, even conservative organizations like in Norfolk and in Newport News, which is just the other side of the bay, I got the NAACP, which is a very conservative organization. It's a Black organization, Black betterment and so on, but they're totally milquetoast and they're not for militancy, but they signed on and endorsed.
But Don was just saying in Chicago, they refused, right? And
that was in D.C.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah. So some would endorse some others.
Yes, exactly.
Right. There's no clear policy.
No. In fact, we exploit the contradictions.
Right.
Yeah. And Sarah, go ahead.
And Don's saying we exploit the contradictions. Even going into a union office, the best thing is to be honest. Not to proselytize, but to just make it clear who you are. And you would always go into an office with the Workers' Vanguard, the partisan, at that time we didn't do this in the auspices of the Partisan Defense Committee, but today we very often do. And you just have the paper Partisan Defense Committee and the Workers' Vanguard, and you start off saying, look, I know we have a lot of differences, but there's a threat to all of us. And it is, as Don described, the united front approach. And you say, I know that your organization, and I always do a little, work and research and figure out when were the strikes this union had, what are the strikes that affected them, what are the cutbacks that they're facing, and the background of some of the leaders, so that you know that you have somebody who you're talking to. Sometimes you're talking to a union where the person was an ex-radical, and you would talk a different way. But it's always the same thing, that you're quite upfront about who we are, what we want to do, and that although we might have differences of the ultimate objective, you want to rely on Democrats. We think that's a big mistake, and here's why. But for this demonstration, we can agree that we have to have bodies out there to fight a definite threat to the unions, to blacks, to immigrants. And that is a way that you can intersect the contradictions that happen. And you do it honestly and in a pretty much straightforward way. I just have found that is, if you're fairly candid about these things, that you'll be successful. The problem today is much harder, because this was at a time when many of the leaders were still left over from 40s and the 50s, and they knew something about the civil rights movement. A lot of that was still fresh. They had that experience. Today, a lot of the union officials are pretty callow and pretty, they moved up through the ranks. Some of them never did anything but were coffee getters, which is what you call somebody that worked his way up by getting coffee for the bureaucrats, and then he got appointed to a position, and then he got elected to a position. And there's no sense of struggle. And it's much harder today. I think if we tried to do this today, it would be much more difficult. I mean, that's a fact of life. I mean, we know that there's a retrogression of consciousness, and that's something that would have to be faced. But I do think that the membership of the unions is who you can appeal to. And if you go to the base and you light a fire under the bureaucracy might become a lot more receptive.
I wanted to say about the obstacles we confronted in '82. You had the CP line, ban the Klan, right?
Ban the Klan.
Yeah. Telling to outlaw the Klan, which is to say...
To Reagan himself.
Yeah. There you go, to break it down, to Reagan himself, right? You had the Socialist Workers' Party who had a position of debating the Klan.
Oh, my God.
And treating it like a civil libertarian issue, like the liberals brazen no free speech for the fascists and stuff. And so you say, well, look, we're not talking about a group engaged in speech. They're not just another right-wing organization. This is a paramilitary action, racist terrorist action organization. That's what the Klan is. So there's you go, the SWP, there were no factor. The CP wasn't a factor. And in the case of the CWP earlier, their whole thing, even though they were union organizers, it was not the orient toward the only class that had a social power is the working class. The personal confrontation is what they were actually all about. And of course, a lot of black nationalists say, this is just a white man's thing, It concerned us, They're going to do what they want to do. So, with the exception, of course, Robert F. Williams in Detroit, when we had our labor black mobilization against the Klan of the Greensboro massacre, he stood out, even though he was a member of the Republican New Africa, the nationalist group. He was a civil rights fighter, and he was a fighter for black liberation for many years and was driven out of the country. So he had no problems in getting on board with us. But for the most part in D.C., we were running up against leftists who basically saw it as a spark thing. They don't want to go up against the black Democrats. They don't want to go up against the Democrats. That's what you had to do. Each action we had to go up against the Black Democratic Party administrations. We had to go up against many other obstacles, because not to say what Gene was saying about how we got them on board in D.C. was correct. But we know in some of our other actions, like later on, like in Springfield, the AFL-CIO tried to stop us. They were telling workers to stay away. This is 1988 Springfield anti-fascist action. But I won't go there. But the role of the party and the leadership and providing that leadership and organization was key to all of those things we did. Without that, we couldn't have done it. Our understanding is that we had to have the working class. Otherwise, it's just a small group of leftists.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that there were a number of ruses to try to prevent our strategy from happening. It was not just ban the Klan. There were some people that actually advocated free speech for the Klan because they said, we'll expose them, and various other tactics of ignore the Klan. So, and this is what all of the liberals, is a perfect setup to basically give the Klan and the fascists in this country a lot of oxygen and a lot of chance to grow. So even in Washington, D.C., there's a group called Workers' World Party. I think they had a front group called All People's Congress or something. And they usually organize big demonstrations and try to exclude people they don't like. Well, they set up an anti-Klan, supposedly rally about 20 or 30 blocks away, intentionally, so that people would not, try to stop the Klan. So in effect, what they were doing was let the Klan march and we'll have our own demonstration. So what actually happened was they had set up their marshals to keep those people who wanted to join our demonstration from coming 20 blocks south and join the demonstration. And they held them back. And then when they couldn't hold them back, the cops had to try to hold them back. And some of them got thrown into plate glass windows. And that's the only place that the police confronted. We never had a confrontation. The cops shot off some tear gas at the end of the march in Lafayette Park, but we were basically dispersing. But the cops attacked the Marciite liberals that were trying to keep people from doing what we called to do. So that's an example of, even amongst leftists, not just Democratic Party people and the black faces in high places, the Marion Barrys and the Wilson Goods of Philadelphia who murdered the MOVE people, the MOVE organization. So there's a lot that we had to overcome in Washington, D.C. And the Socialist Party USA, which is one of the most right-wing organizations, they try to do a job also. But there was resolute response. I think it was the laborers local. In D.C., we have the Postal Workers Union, the Building Laborers Union, the AFT Local 6, that's the teachers, and Brotherhood of Railway. We had a number of unions in D.C. that endorsed, and I believe it was the laborers union. I might not remember this correctly, but the police threatened to put a snow fence, these fences that are wood slats held with wire, completely around the area that we were going to meet, which would have effectively incarcerated the demonstration. And we found that absolutely intolerable. So we had to have a confrontation with the police in terms of legally challenging that. But the laborers union had the most direct approach. He told, because he was a well-known labor leader in the city, and I believe he told some police officer, if you try to put that wooden fence completely around, my laborers are extremely skilled workers and they'll make short work of that wooden fence.
Correct.
So they ended up just trying to put the fence just on the edge of the Constitution Avenue. And that fence turned into splinters at the right moment. And when the Klan was stopped. They were trying to,
and also the Civil War issue was really pertinent.
The Civil War issue.
Yeah, finishing the Civil War we talked about in relationship to this demonstration. It's no accident that the shipyard workers from Norfolk were being talked about. Their bus was called the Nat Turner Brigade, right? Because they knew what it meant. They know that the South, that the racist reaction wasn't dead and in fact was growing, and that these Klansmen, which was born during this period of political counter-revolution against Reconstruction, they had keen historical memories too, just like we did. That the period of Reconstruction was halted by the fact that primarily it was a political betrayal, right, on the part of the Northern industrial-based bourgeoisie that made its alliance with the defeated slaveholders in order to extend capitalist relations in the South. In the South. So when we say finish the Civil War for Black liberation and proletarian revolution, well, how did you get that? Well, one of the things we were trying to do, we formed these labor Black leagues to try to broaden out our intervention into the Black neighborhoods around issues of police brutality and fighting racism to be able to eat at a restaurant.
Yeah.
We did a number of things. I'm going too far ahead, but it's important to understand that demonstration in historical terms too, because it was like today what we're confronted with, right? With, this government giving the prominence to Confederate everything, renaming Confederate Army bases, it's all over. It's all in your face, Just getting back to 82. One thing about leadership, it was the party in action. Because it was the party question in action. At the end of the demonstration, when those people took to the road, particularly them Black youth, and they started rerouting the traffic and everything, we were going into the Lafayette Park, and we were met by tear gas. And it was interesting. So Al Nelson was in the park, and I was told to head to the park too.
This is at the end of the demonstration?
At the end of the demonstration, because everybody's saying, we stopped the Klan, we stopped the Klan.
Right.
And they were electrified. These Black youth was looking at the Black cops who was on the streets and said, motherfucker, you get out. He said, remember me, I see you in the neighborhood. I'm going to fuck you up. They were pissed off. And anyway, what happened was that the tear gas came. And my eyes said, oh, shit. And people start panicking. I can see panic in their eye. George Foster, our comrade, leading comrade, was on the bullhorn. He said, labor Black mobilizations, slow down, do not run. He kept repeating it. And I saw people stop running like chickens with their head cut off. And they started slowly leaving the park and not just trampling each other. So the role of that bullhorn and the directing everybody, it was crucial. Pay attention to details, right? Yeah. So, it's all exciting. I'm kind of reliving it in a little bit.
Yeah. In doing research for this, I watched this documentary, as I said earlier, but there's so many things to go into. Just for our listeners, some punchlines. So we, as a result of mobilizing various union locals and getting their endorsements and doing all the work that we did, so we successfully mobilized around 5,000 people. Yes?
Right.
Majority of them Black. It looks like. And, it was a genuine United Front effort. And watching that footage, I'd be curious to hear what some of your highlights from that period are. But for me, the slogan at the end said, we stop the Klan, we stop the Klan. So the Klan didn't show, or just what exactly happened actually?
Well, the newsreel showed that they were dejected, and they had the brown bags with their robes hanging out. And so they were escorted by the police out of the city. So there's a newsreel that actually showed that. I saw a picture of it also taken by our party.
The police were more helpful to the Klan than that.
What they do?
Because when the Klan was about to march, the word came down. We had somebody, the spotter up there.
Yeah.
And that's when the snow fences along the thing, they turned into splinters. And the entire crowd, 5,000 people, flooded the street and started marching up the hill towards where the Klan wanted to begin their march.
I see.
At that point, the cop said, you're not marching. We can't possibly handle this situation. You can't do it. But what they offered them to do is they put them into a little school bus and they brought them over to Lafayette Park so they could claim they went from one place to the White House. And that's when we ended up marching over to Lafayette Park. And it was so impressive that, these Black youth, they're moving faster than anybody else. And they directed traffic. That it was as if they were trained people. This gives you an idea how in a revolution people transfer. I mean, not to make But it really gives you a picture of how, without any training, they weren't a part of any pre-planning. They were directing traffic. They moved barricades out of the way so that people wouldn't get hurt. Traffic would be directed. And we were able to just flow as if it was all planned. Al Nelson needed the bullhorn, and we had to run the bullhorn to the front because sound controls the crowd. And that's why we were able to get to Lafayette Park. And they had to abandon Lafayette Park. I think they might have got one person out of the school bus by then, but they immediately had to leave. And Al Nelson made his speech where he said, there's no white sheets here. There's only the red banner of the working class. Yeah. And it made everybody feel like we were cohesive. We were orderly. There was tear gas, yes. But, as Don mentioned, there was an orderly departure. And we had reserved the hall so that everybody could come and celebrate the victory that we had. But it was clearly disciplined. And, it took a communist organization to actually coordinate this whole thing with the help of many trade unions and many civil rights groups and youth groups.
The youth, they were the ones that really, you're talking about the ones that helped direct traffic? Yeah. Well, we touched the nerve there. These people were poor as hell.
Yeah. I think one thing that does come through really clearly, one of my favorite things about that documentary is like as people are making speeches on the stage, you hear from the audience like, "Oh yeah, you tell them," or things like this, which it really shows that what we were doing was really intersecting a felt need of the exact moment.
That's right.
And then at the end of the march, where everybody is, you could just see the confidence bursting out of the whole march when everybody's chanting, "We stop the Klan, we stop the Klan." I was talking with a comrade in the lead up to this podcast, trying to prepare for it. And she was explaining how some of these youth, they're like, well, we stop the Klan, we can stop anything. We can stop traffic, we can do this. For me, what that speaks to is building the confidence and the self-organization of the oppressed and of the masses, which I think is something that sounds so basic, but it's the same way I felt in the course of a strike, for example, when you feel like you cannot, granted, not very successful strikes, but feeling that your action can actually achieve something, or if not achieve something directly, at least that there's potential for it, and I think that was so palpable in those scenes. I do want to ask you, what maybe one highlight from that demonstration each?
One highlight?
Yeah, like what's like if I say to you, DC anti-Klan mobilization, like give me one snippet, like what is that for you?
Well, it was for me like going to a place I never. Well, I don't think up to that time I had gone to DC. I was living in Detroit, but knowing full well that we had to deal with everything that was arrayed against us. We had to mobilize against the press that was mobilized against us. We had to try to get the union endorsements, which you got. We had to deal with these diversions that they had. But I really understood, probably more acutely than I ever had up to that point, a role of revolutionary leadership. Because without it, you wouldn't have we couldn't pull that off. We knew what we wanted, and we went after it. That's one of the things that Canada used to say: "Yeah, figure out what you want to do, then do it." Right?
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. And the other thing is, it is inspiring. The Black youth, when they were, they took charge, so to speak, in their own terms. To try to help organize people. Yeah, the resourcefulness and creativity that can be unleashed. So, yeah, I know that a couple of years later, when I was visiting my family down in Southern California, I happened to be in Los Angeles, and a schoolmate I hadn't seen in years, she says, I was at a bus stop, we were waiting for the same bus in downtown Los Angeles. She says, "Donald, is that you?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I ain't seen you for a long time." She says, "You know what? I saw you on the news. you was cussing out the Klan.
Right.
So it reached wide, you know.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
really did. It including had echoes and, had knowledge of our rally went to the South. We were told
Mhm.
that people in the South knew about it.
Mhm.
So
It did reach, from what I could tell, I was, again, in the research for this, the Washington Post had an article about this. I sent it to you. I mean, it's nothing objectionable, but they're citing you because apparently you said to them that, the reporter asked you, I have it here, I'll link the article in the show notes. The article says, a group calling itself the Labor Black Coalition to Stop the Klan in Washington, D.C. held a press conference yesterday and predicted that about 5,000 people would meet at the foot of the Capitol, where the Klansmen are scheduled to begin their march, but would not cross police lines. And there's a quote from you. If the Ku Klux Klan shows up, they will find thousands of us standing up right there, said Don Andrews of the Spartacist League, a New York-based socialist organization. So this is in the Washington Post, but I also heard, I'm not sure who it was who was telling me this, but I also heard that Eddie Murphy did a show.
yeah, during his
Eddie Murphy, the black comedian, did a show, and then he referenced this rally. Like it was a thing, because of what it was. Like you stopped the Klan. It's a big deal. That's why we're still talking about it here, 2026.
Yeah, we're not powerless. Working people got a sense of their social power, and that's you're saying raising the consciousness, and it can be done. It has to be done in a very conscious, disciplined way. Otherwise we can't win.
Yeah.
But so that's my take of it.
Yeah, Gene, what's your highlight?
Well, I thought it gives a picture of how, with overwhelming odds, the key is a class perspective as both fighting against the oppression of the most oppressed and victimized people, but using the power that they have, and that you can show people what power they have. And the thing that liberals as well as the right wingers want to hide this fact because they want to keep things within the realm of the capitalist society that we live in today. So this is extremely important. And it's important actually for those of us who even led it, how it actually played out. We learned a tremendous amount from this event ourselves, and it went beyond where we thought it was going to go. It was very successful. Not just that we stopped the Klan, but the links and the connections that we made and the respect that we earned for our organization. Not that this is just braggadocio, but we actually earned some respect. As a result of this, we organized a local in both Atlanta and in Washington, D.C. We started an organizing committee in the Tidewater area. We made a foray into the South. And no small thing, as Don mentioned, was the connection between still having to fight the results of the Civil War as the capitalists continually try to roll back the gains that had been made in the Civil War and during Reconstruction. And since then, it's been nibbling away at turning the clock back. And this is why this is a small example of how that can be reversed and how ultimately it'll never be solved under capitalism. And I think a lot of people learned that lesson. I think this demonstration was unique in that regard, and it defied the bourgeois law and the naysayers and the liberals that wanted to keep things under control. So it really showed working class power. And it also showed they saw many whites want to fight for Black liberation, which is a key thing in this country, because the main thing that holds back a working class revolution in this country is the division created by the capitalists. But this is why fighting for Black liberation will see that their future can only be resolved in terms of overcoming the takebacks and the grinding down if they link arms and for an integrated struggle. Ultimately, a working class revolution.
Yeah, there's lots in what you said there. Before we pivot on to sort of today, I want to touch on this point, which maybe I can make it in a coherent way, which is, we're a small, we were at the time, I assume, also a smallish organization. But oftentimes the arguments you hear on the left is, we're too small, we can't do this, we can't pull this off. Or, you translate that same argument to the realm of the trade unions, communists and the trade unions. Oh, we're too small to challenge the bureaucracy, or we're too small to go out on strike, or so, things like this. I think for me, some of the things that I learned through you guys talking about this is really what's the bread and butter of a revolutionary party? It's we have to try and fight in the course of struggles as they emerge, right? We have to, just within the unions, so much of our day-to-day work is building our own political authority and political profile, showing that what we have to say, what we have to offer has a relevance to the day-to-day struggles on the job. And in the broader context. And I think in the same way, it's building that self-confidence of the class of the oppressed in their own power. And through that, learning, one of the things you did mention, I think I'm correct in saying this, Black history and the class struggle came out of this too, out of this whole series of experience, right? Yeah. It's building the party and building the movement together, hand in hand. And I think this is one of the mistakes that the left makes a lot of. And it's one of the debates that we're inserting ourselves in right now today about, there's all this conversation about join the Revolutionary Party, build the Revolutionary Party. But it's the fundamental thing that I think is often missed is that you are going to build a party through struggle, through intervening into the struggles of the oppressed. And I think this also for me crystallizes just actual nitty gritty, even from organizational experience, from the links, from the reputation, from the political depth that comrades gained out of it. All of this stuff, it comes from understanding, leadership, which you've been talking about. We have to do something. The Klan's marching. You can't just sit on your side. Mm-hmm. You can't do that. Right. So for me, this is some of the stuff that I get out of this. But speaking of what to get out of this, I want to talk about today. Yeah. So you guys are both veteran Trotskyists. You've spent your life fighting for this, as you mentioned in the introductions. There's a number of things I want to talk about, but I think first, your reflections on the state of the movement today. Maybe that's too broad. I started in the introduction talking about how Trump's in the White House. Yeah. Back then it was Reagan, now it's Trump. There's police brutality everywhere in this country, but you don't see the same, you don't see a struggle on the streets. Yeah. Of course, there's, I'm sure there's tiny grouplets here and there. There's efforts, but what's needed does not exist. Yeah. And before we get into what should exist and all of that, I want to actually get some reflections from you two about, you've been in the party, 40, 50 years. You've seen things. How do you see today? I guess I want to get a bit of sense of that.
Well, I see today a whole new generation of youth, young people that clearly see that they have no future in capitalism. There's no decent jobs. I know that the education is not even within people's reach hardly anymore, and there's more and more people that are just barely eating. So there's a level of desperation that's growing among all sections of the population. So you would expect in that context to see some despair and hopelessness. And at the same time, you always have people around that is looking at what's happening around the world. See U.S. imperialist aggression in Venezuela, trying to restore capitalism in Cuba, bombing the hell out of Iranians, which we as communists, of course, oppose from an internationalist standpoint. And then here at home, just making Black people feel that they should still be enslaved. Mm-hmm. So the tendency you have to fight against is to turn inwards. Yeah. Look, if you don't think the white working class are allies, or the international working class are the allies of Black people fighting for their freedom, or for Latinos and brown people, who are allies? The treacherous liberals, who gave us Donald Trump. Now they beating the drum for the elections coming up. We need our own party. We need a class struggle leadership and labor. It starts on the basic factory floor, shopping, workshop, You got to fight against segregation, for instance. Our supporters in Longshore, right, are doing good work fighting against tears, right? At ILWU, breaking it down for people. Like, these lower tier workers, they don't even have health benefits. They can't even, they come, I don't know. I remember, can they attend union meetings? Yeah, they can attend it, but they can't speak, right?
They got to sit upstairs.
They got to sit up like Jim Crow. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So we see the fruits of the betrayals of the labor bureaucracy. So it's got to be a fight for a real class struggle leadership in the unions. Now, the white workers will come to understand. We said in Black and Red that they will be compelled to forego their race prejudice. I'd rather put it another way. This is that in the course of the struggle, you need a subjective factor. You need conscious revolutionaries, time and time again, pounding away that there's common material, there's shared class interests in fighting against the capitalist exploiters. Got to have multiracial unity based upon a revolutionary program. If you want a separatist road today, if you're Black militant, and you say, well, I don't need these white people, they're going to just stab me in the back again, blah, 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 blah. That's just doing the work of the man, as we used to say. That's just, hey, yeah, these Black people are in their own doing their own little thing. We'll get a good night's sleep, right?
Right.
Instead of like thinking about what's the social power and forces around us. So I think that people, they have to understand some aspect of why you have to be a communist, why you have to understand why Marxist program is key. It's based upon materialist understanding, right? I mean, do you think that white workers are white people inherently racist? Is that what unchangeable human nature? That sounds very religious, don't it? So it's like, no, we can't get to have a clear scientific understanding of the society we live in, and from that standpoint, we have to identify what are the levers of social power. So I end with this. One of the things why I love the Panthers, I didn't join them because I didn't think they have a revolutionary program, but they kept saying, I read the paper, they said there's a difference between power and influence. If you fight for influence, you just want a little niche in society. The power is the ability to define phenomena in a desirable manner. So what they were getting at is that you have to fight for your own. You have to fight against the obstacles, You said to be in the driver's seat. Didn't have a program to fulfill that, but at least they knew that you have to fight for some power. And not influence. We don't want to influence the sections of the ruling class to be champions of the poor and oppressed. Not just break already, right? In the DSA.
Right. Gene?
Well, Don said a lot of what we have to get across to the working class and the oppressed to fight. But the question is, how do you get to that? And right now, let's face it, this is an extremely reactionary period. And the working class is getting it in the teeth. There are endless, the grinding away of gains that had been won and secured are not so secure. They're being taken away. They're being whittled away. People are starving. They're sick. They're, even union people. I mean, today's paper talked about how even Walmart and Costco, the box store where you save, they are losing customers because people can't afford to go out. So it has to start on some elemental level wherever people go to struggle, that you try to win them to a working class perspective, because that's where their strength is. Even if they're not in a union, they should seek out support from unions. They know people who are in unions, but at least that's a building block so that they won't destroy themselves. Many frustrated youth, Hispanic youth, Black youth will unfortunately grind themselves out because they're going to want to fight, because they're not going to take it. And the tragedy is that they would waste their energy because they don't really have a program and a direction. So our task is to try to win those that want to struggle and show them a way that it can be done successfully, along the lines that Don was saying. But in the unions, it's not all just hopeless. Yes, they're on a defensive, they're on the back foot. But yet and still, there have been strike after strike that it showed that workers are not just letting down. The workers at Boeing, for instance, it took 3 votes. And the bureaucracy knows that if you run enough votes, you'll eventually get what you want and you'll wear people down. But in the course of that, in the Boeing strike, there were, in fact, workers that cohered around our program and that wanted to work around that and formed a group in the union and tried to fight against the leadership. Whether it was successful or not, and it wasn't, it was successful to the extent that they found each other, and you can build on that. That is not something to be neglected. And that was true in a number of the meatpackers strike, where they fought very hard and very valiantly against horrible conditions. The bureaucracy defeated them. And you go back to a Hormel strike back in Minnesota, where the International smashed the strike themselves and pulled the rug out from under them. But in strike after strike, even today, as bad as things are, there are little glimmers of wanting to fight back. And those are the people we want to find. And those are the building blocks for how a defensive struggle can become an offensive struggle. But it takes time and it takes patience to win those people over in those situations. And that's where we come in. And we have been successful. We had in the National Maritime Union formed a Group 2 Rights Committee to defend the lower tiered workers to make them full union members. Don mentioned the No Tiers Committee that exists today in the ILWU. And there are other instances where in the union you can fight against that kind of discrimination because the capitalists know that by dividing the working class, primarily the Black question is the key way they divide the working class, but whether it's age or sex or sexual orientation or whatever else it is, that is what they want to use. So our fight has to be to unify the working class to overcome that. And that's why the fight against Black liberation, the main dividing point, the fight for it has to be driven home, and winning people to that perspective will take time, but you can be surprised sometimes that history can jump you ahead very fast. And sometimes the working class can go faster than the revolutionaries because they pick up on things.
Yeah, but I want to can I make a comment? Yeah. Just a little bit. Look, a lot of the people went through some struggle, like the BLM. And I remember when that was happening, our party we didn't have our heads straight up. We didn't have our heads on right. Whatever the expression of, we weren't in an interventionist. We didn't have an interventionist perspective as far as being able to address the real arguments that was coming up. And a lot of the lessons of that and why it fell was because of the whole movement was built on the basis of alliance with liberals. And the whole program behind them was like they wanted to, restructure the police forces and take the existing police forces and realign them and hold them accountable and have oversight committees. And that was what was programmatically driving it, right? Now, a lot of people was inspired by that. It was really multiracial. It was really multiracial movement. And Black youth saw that. But they got profoundly demoralized, right? A lot of people got, oh man, because I remember reading and listening to some people say, the youth were saying, it didn't work, man. I don't know what the fuck worked, where are we going to, what to do, because it's just one racist thing after another. So we're trying to rebuild a struggle, the Black movement, against racial oppression on the basis of a fighting Marxist program. But a lot of people, we got OPA, Open the Police Archives. Now that does touch us a nerve because people Chicago, I'll give you an example. Our comrades in Chicago telling stories about some of the victims of police torture in Chicago. Their families are coming to our Open Police Archives events and telling their stories. And this enables us to have a fruitful discussion on how to connect the fight for Black freedom to the working class fight against capitalism and also trying to deal with making it clear that any support to the enemy parties and like Brandon Johnson and Democrats in Chicago is a road to defeat because this guy's against the workers, he's against black people. The police are getting their way. They shooting up black people left and right. So, and then here in New York, you got man damn here. Most of the left is just ooh and on about a man that's on the side of the real estate barons, and it's gross, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it is. We can't ignore reality. This has been a profound reactionary period right now. It's indeed is. But hell, I felt the same way during Reagan reaction period. It was tough to be a communist, or even because I remember comrades were saying, "Well, come join the Spartacist League," and also, talking black. We're trying to recruit black people, and we said, and have a hell of a time, even harder time. So it's right. But you gotta try to intervene where you can, thoughtfully and concretely deal with the felt needs and issues that people are raising, whether it's in the housing projects or in the unions itself, among women, a lot of whom are just crushed with even more poverty and unemployment, but all the women are laid off in the federal government. I mean, it's just, it's a picture that's been pointed out on what is to be done, a single picture of police tyranny. And that's what we're living under, right? America, the prison house, and the prison house, unlike Tsar's Russia, the prison house of nation, U.S., the prison house, period. So, it's tough. And a lot of people are holding back and they're scared, but we can't just throw in our towel. Can't throw in the towel. You got to also study history and look at what our forebears did.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
I have one question.
I got
a few.
Question.
I got a few, but this one sort of, I think it's a question we confront in our work generally. It's this phrase, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? If you've got the program, where's the people?
Where are the people at?
Where is the people? But that's just a general thing. But I would like to hear how do you make sense of why you don't see more Black radicals as part of the Marxist movement?
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, right? I mean, part of it you can see when we're talking about our previous demonstrations of successful labor Black mobilizations against the fascists over the years, which were exemplary actions showing what was necessary. But see, the lessons of the civil rights movement is clear. Most of the left during the period of the civil rights movement, they tell the preachers, they tell the Democratic Party and the Black nationalists and our forerunners and the Socialist Workers Party, the revolutionary tendency fought for communist intervention in that movement. But the left betrayed after the civil rights movement collapsed. The fight for integrations of the schools, where were they at? They were post-mobilizing labor to defend those Black school children, right? They were supporting legalistic strategies of the NAACP. And in the case of the Social Worker Party, they were active in the pro-busing, struggles in Boston. Most of the left, even as I said, they were not at all trying to mobilize the working class. In the 80s, they were telling behind Jesse Jackson. Each decade, you can see the left throwing a lot in with the so-called lesser evil of American Party of American imperialism. And it weakened the labor movement, and it weakened the Black movement, all of that. Because these people, during that period, they had people around them that wanted to fight. They wanted to fight for socialism as much as they understood it. So today, when they look back at the Black Panther Party, they say, well, the Black youth will say, well, maybe we're just going all off on our own. Well, you got to first understand what happened. People were saying that white workers are just privileged and they ain't gonna never unite with us. You got to understand why that's wrong. They're not the rich. They ain't the ones ruling this country. They're not the ones that are the source of Black oppression. It's rooted in a capitalist private property system that pits people against each other. Now, you can play the man's game and divide and conquer, or you can challenge it up front, but you're not going to make a revolution independently of the rest of American society. That's just the hard cold truth. So why aren't we rich? Well, it's like the whole question comes down to leadership. Again, our forces are few internationally. We are fighting tooth and nail in the sense of the poor and oppressed in Latin America. In South Africa, we gave critical support to the EFF, the Economic Freedom Party, with our criticism of that parliamentarist electoral strategy. Cuba, we had United Front demonstrations in defense of the Cuban Revolution. These people are starving. The American blockade is just starving these people. Most of them boycotted it. So guess why you have a fewer, youth involved in these struggles and workers is due to these betrayals, and people just say, well, one way to go, Spartacist League is even smaller. They might talk a good game and they might sound good, but what we're trying to do is like, Eric Dupre case in New York, our comrades were stubbornly and energetically involved in that case. From the beginning to the end, most people might or may not know, he was the young Hispanic man that was killed in the Bronx when they were cops were so-called making a drug bust, and one of the cops threw a cooler at him and smashed his head in, and he died. In recent trial, he was ruled guilty, and then they still released the cop on bail.
Yeah.
It just goes to show whose system it is. There's no justice for the oppressed under this system. Yeah, it's hard in a period where we are, where it seems like the American imperialism is going from one barbaric attack to another, and there's very little protest. But as Cannon used to say, the other side is tired out too.
What did Cannon used to say?
They are.
They're tiring out.
They're
okay.
Yeah, you look at it. Look at the Abraham Lincoln ship. By the way, what did I say to the Abraham Lincoln ship for imperialist war? The fellas coming back, a lot of them trying to kill themselves. So there's a lot of hatred for this racist imperialist government in this country. It ain't enough to hate your oppressors. You got to know what program to fight around to win. Program is primary, and I keep saying that is because as they used to say, if you don't know where you want to go, any road can take you there. And I think that it really is true. It's just like you look at organizations. I said, even I was joining many years ago, there was no black members I could see in the Bay Area. Said, these people have the right program. That's what's key. White workers are propertyless wage slaves. I learned that from Marx. I didn't learn that from Martin Luther King. Most of the left, what do they say? Most of the left, they're like, Martin Luther King this, and he was just becoming a socialist, this and that, and blah, blah. All of them, right? That's betrayals.
Right.
And we have to tell people the hardcore truth. No, he was not a socialist. He was a pro-democratic party, liberal pacifist who taught the masses to love their oppressors. I can't put it better than Malcolm X. I won't go into that yet.
Yeah. Gene, thoughts?
Well, somebody was,
I hate the proofs, but anyway, you got it.
Why aren't you rich? The fact is, nobody's really rich. Of the people, look around and have a sense of proportion here. What group that claims to be socialist, let alone communist, and uses the word revolutionary? It's basically the proportions are within range for all of them. And we're talking about a few hundred. Now, I'm not talking about the DSA that's with the Democratic Party and doesn't want to break from capitalist politics and so on. They might have a few thousand, but they're wedded right in the belly of the beast. So that's their choice. But as far as communist groups, nobody's rich. So, and the point is that nobody knows, how history works in terms of class struggle. But the one thing that you have to do is you have to have your program to keep you going. And because everybody knows, and even the capitalists have acknowledged that they're in trouble. Yeah. And that's why they're running around the world trying to, U.S. imperialism is trying to use its military might to keep not only the oppressed and victimized under control, but also, to have their imperialist competitors under control. And the way they're going to do it is by building their military, by starving out the American working class. And the most oppressed that don't have a job are going to get it the worst. So there will be points of rebellion, and we're fighting for our program, and we seize on the concrete situations and what are the concrete needs that people have, and show how our program is applicable in terms of the way that they can get it. So I think that, I think the rich question is an old,
it's a trap.
Yeah,
I threw you
exactly.
a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trick question. So the point is that we have in our way influenced far beyond even what we know we have, but we have to be persistent and in terms of fighting in the trade unions, in the Black liberation struggle, in the anti-ICE and the defense of immigrant struggle. All of these struggles, our program will be relevant, and people will want to fight. And when they do, they will see who actually is against the system that's doing it to them and who is actually trying to bolster the system. It's the people that say, find the best possible Democratic politician, or find the most friendly Democrat as the better alternative. And I think people are pretty much fed up with that. And they'll still vote, and they might even vote in numbers, but I think that it's pretty clear that their alternatives are not very good. Mm-hmm. And I think we have seen situations in unions where they have separate Black and white locals where members are getting fed up with that. And then they see that they have a contract and it wasn't really fought for, and that there are things that they need and they're not getting them, and they're not getting medical care, and so on and so forth. These concretes, by showing how that's connected to the entire system of profit, is going to be a way to win them to our program and the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So, that's my answer of how we get from where we are today. I personally would like to see us run a candidate with a real program, because I think that it would be very attractive compared to the pathetic, even the left-wing and socialist, so-called socialist groups that have run candidates. It would be nice to have a candidate that would actually rally some votes as a poll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's obstacles like the trade union bureaucracy. You can look at the UAW head, Sean Payne, these so-called progressive bureaucrats in these unions, supporting Biden and I don't
Kamala.
know.
Was it Kamala?
Yeah, they supported Kamala and stuff like that. During the strike, there were Black workers in Detroit that wanted to go out, and they had the sentiment. They really supported that strike, and they had some demonstrations. I guess which union in Detroit. It was they're the natural objective allies of the working class. Mm-hmm. And these, and Sean Fain, this is divisive. No, you're divisive. They're divisive, right? And the left who supports him, they're the ones that help perpetuate the divisions. Mm-hmm. That's why we've been held back. So don't think that we all fighting for the same thing. We're going in the same direction. That's not true. Mm-hmm. Where we do have common issues like defending the people that are victims of repression, we get together. We should unite, right? That's what united front. Temporary block for action. But no, we ain't not going to merge our programs. That's what the people that want to build class collaboration as coalitions want to do. But one thing we can do that I'm really hot about, y'all people think about, is fighting segregation in those schools. Mm-hmm. Look at New York City. You got Stuyvesant High School. Just what? School over 700 students, 7 Black students. and I don't know, maybe a few more Hispanic. This is like, when did the Civil War end? 1865, right? I mean, it's not abstract. It's just like, no, we're supposed to roll over and play dead. We need the working class allies to wage this battle. Let's go get them. Wherever you are in your workplace, talk to people about what's going on in the world. Obviously, you be accustomed to talking about how the bosses are screwing you and what you need to do to improve your conditions at work. That's natural. But also, we have to pay attention about what's going on. Why you should oppose the American imperialist empire all down the line, whether, in Iran or Venezuela or Cuba. That's important. See, that's the thing about the fight for Black oppression. It's not just an American national question. It's actually have international implications. And that's who our allies are. Even during slavery, the Civil War, it was the British workers and Marx and First International organized. Yeah, okay, well, so it is definitely hard as hell to be a communist anywhere. And when you're in the belly of the beast, oh my God, you have to realize that, yes, this is the most monstrous imperialist power. And as Trotsky said, the bourgeoisie don't want to die. But we have to say what is. We have to tell the truth. We're not telling people that things are going to the left. That's not reality.
Yeah,
and that's what some of the leftists are saying.
Yeah, for sure. There's more we can talk about, but for me, I do want to just link, the period from the 80s and the mobilization attempts we did to today. I think some of the things that stand out to me is, illusions in the Democratic Party. Still, back then it was Coleman Young and Marion Barry. Today it's people like Mamdani and so on, but you're still fighting the same fight, like no illusions in the Progressive Party of the capitalists, the bureaucracy. I think that, I really appreciate what you said about Sean Fain, that actually it's those economist politics that are divisive, that are actually, they repel the oppressed masses. And that's not just talking about Black folks, but that's talking about women, as well. It's like, well, if you're not going to fight on the job for things that impact me and my ability to do my work and my life, then what's the point? What do I care about your socialism and all of your revolution and all of that stuff? So it's, I think it's really to put the question on what are the obstacles and the existing leaderships that are really holding back, and that honestly, that make the left look bad. That make the left look bad to oppressed groups often. So for me, those are some of the similarities that stand out. You've mentioned a number of times in this conversation, Don, open the police archives.
Yeah, open the police archives.
Yeah, now that's not an episode I've done so far in the show. I would like to, but for me, I do have this genuine question. So I'm not American, but
You're
North
international.
America. But for me, I recently, in my summer holidays, I watched a couple of things.
Yeah.
I watched for the first time, I was telling you, Hurricane, the movie about, what's his name, Reuben Carter?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reuben Carter.
Yeah, I watched that movie, and then that got me wanting to rewatch the recent Netflix series When They See Us, which is about the Central Park Five.
Yeah.
But last night I was watching another movie. It's in the South in the 60s. But this country, for me, as an outsider, I have this genuine question, which is why isn't there more of a fuss about fighting police oppression and defense of prisoners?
I'm part of the left.
Yeah, why isn't that a thing? Or am I wrong? Is it a thing? Is it not a thing? Why isn't it a thing?
No,
it's
think
just
you're right.
out there. It's just constant.
Yeah, you want to say something about it? No, go ahead, James.
I think a lot of the left has, participated in movements for different people that are in prison. Liberals have taken up some of those things, but I don't think it's generalized. I think they take up particular individuals, but it's not generalized that this is the Black question, because there way disproportionately incarcerated. It's been found the death penalty is much more meted out to Black people. And if somebody gets killed, and if it's a white person, it's much more draconian than if a Black person. So I think that some leftist groups have done some lip service, I'd say, and even mobilized and even maybe, done things individually, but none of them have the perspective of how to actually mobilize except to sink this by appeals to the bourgeois state and seeing recourse within the bourgeois state, which most people know is a dead end. So I think that once you have that kind of an orientation of appealing and working your way through the better judges or a good DA, everybody had faith in the new DA in Philadelphia, and he's done everything to screw Mumia Abu-Jamal just as much. And so I think that even what they have done basically is tailored to work within the system. And I don't think that motivates a lot of people to go out. I think one of the reasons that a lot of these movements, like the fight for Peltier, a lot of people supported it. They write letters and so on. But there isn't that much that they can accomplish because it really takes a movement. That's another example of when we took up the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, we knew that it would take bigger forces than us, and we didn't consider it our own terrain. We encouraged anybody and everybody, including bourgeois forces, to fight to save his life. But I think that most of the time, these defense movements get dragged down with reliance on the bourgeois state or a good DA or a better judge or the court system. And it's basically through mobilization of the working class and the oppressed that there would be more of a response.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back also, think about BLM. See, the thing about BLM is most of the left, I know the group called Internationalist Group said that the American political landscape would be radically reshaped as a result of the BLM movement. Nothing about the politics of the movement or anything like that, and how you alliance with non-revolutionary liberal forces is a dead end. And so the thing is that there's a price for these betrayals. People that were involved in a period of time just drop by the wayside, and political lessons have been lost. There are people around that want real community control, and there's some excellent articles in our current Black History and Class Struggle, excellent, in which we take up this debate with the Freedom Socialist Road Organization in Chicago. It's one of the few issues that organizations that actually have been involved with police terror. But who do they support? They support Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson, and he was characterized. See, we're going to have more. It's going to create a different political climate. Oh yeah, 95 bullets in one Black man's head or something. So I get back to BLM stuff because Trotsky pointed out that you need to win over Black workers to make a revolution in the U.S. Otherwise, all of it don't mean anything. And it's a hard nut to crack. But it begins with telling the hard truth. Who betrayed you? And the thing is, the same people that still think that BLM was progressive and all that stuff are supporting Mandela now. They're supporting the DS, the DSA. They're supporting the line of least resistance, which is we Trotskyists know leads right back into the system. So discussions you have with a lot of these young people that are hungry for change, and they don't know what communism is, and they don't know why do we have to go through all of this. There's no substitute for a sober examination of what have occurred in the recent struggle. What labor struggles have been betrayed. Like, look at the meat packers we were talking about earlier, right? And the UAW strike was so sharp. And the left supported this guy's fame, right? And the BLM, wasn't just corruption that killed it. It wasn't even the main issue. It was their program. They wanted to restructure the police apparatus, make it more accountable. So anyway, I just, there's no getting around how difficult the period is. But as we say, I guess it was Marx, you know that quote. We didn't create the circumstances under which we want to wage
That is for sure. That is for sure.
Yeah. And I refuse to say, you think these people are invincible? We obviously, we saw what happened in Vietnam. And people climbing up, their allies, the U.S. imperialism, climbing up on the helicopter, getting out. But why wasn't that transformed into a revolutionary struggle against the capitalist order here in the U.S.? Because the war became even unpopular among the working class. Well, look at what the left did. They were supporting these democratic doves, for a negotiated settlement. Look at 82 in the El Salvador Civil War, right? We were only ones that fighting in defense of the leftist guerrillas against the bloody Salvadorian junta. Military victory to the Farabuno Mati, I think is what they would call them. And the rest of the left calling for a negotiated settlement. So you fast forward to now. In Iran, what are they saying about U.S. imperialist attacks on Iran? Well, they're not calling for any type of fight in the labor movement to oppose this. This is what you got to do. You got to try to mobilize where you can and when you can. Because the workers, they might have their heads down, but they don't like what's going on. And I hate when you have leftists project their pessimism onto the working class. That's a danger too. That's what I found out in my own experience and stuff. Is well, hey, nobody else is doing. I want to see things change, but they don't. They're just concerned about the paycheck. No, not all workers are like that. And so it's a heterogeneous working class. So anyway, it's a horrible situation objectively, but as Gene was also pointing out just now, there has been blips of class struggle that's been really hard fought. And not just there in the U.S. Anyway, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that there have been incidents of struggle and defiance. And even though they weren't outright confrontations of the ranks opposing the leadership in a concerted way and an organized way, those numerous votes rejecting contracts that are sellouts that the bureaucrats present to them, those kinds of situations indicate a kernel of what could actually bloom into an actual rebellion of the workers. Trotsky wrote I think, a very short and I think one of the most powerful things called Trade Unions in the Epoch of Imperialist Decay. And he made it clear that the existing trade unions are basically reformist trade unions, that they fight for a little bit of this and a little bit of that and try to get a little piece of the pie, or at least some crumbs that fall off the table. And the bureaucracy relies on that setup because they live a very comfortable life and they have transformed themselves from being actual workers. Well, workers are not stupid about that. Many of them feel demoralized and sort of cynical, but many of them are getting angry. And that's where these votes are coming from. And that shows that workers are not just going to be passive. And Trotsky said in that article that no longer are reformist trade unions possible, but wholly possible are revolutionary unions, unions led by revolutionaries. And those workers that are now just voting down rotten contracts that the bureaucracy conspires with the bosses to shove down their throat, that could transform in a given situation. Right now, there's a strike on the West Coast against sugar refinery in Crockett, California. And it's the warehouse division of the Longshore Union, Local 6. But all the longshoremen came out in force because they knew why this was a threat to them. And then they used non-union longshoremen. Well, that's a threat. That's a major threat in this country that people have to understand why this is so serious. Because if they are able to, the longshoremen in this country are one of the three most powerful forces, which the longshoremen, the railroad workers, and the Teamsters. Any one of those unions can absolutely crumble the U.S. economy if they went on strike for more than 3 days. And this would be a major threat. Well, if the longshoremen on the West Coast, if they stage something in concert up and down the West Coast, which starts out from a little sugar strike, that could galvanize other sections of the working class in this country. But right now, the existing leadership, they said they passed a motion which was very good. And this was put forward by Emily Turnbull, who was a former exec board member. She worked with other people to pass it to defend the people that got arrested on a picket line. So you have the Crockett 10. But more than that has to be done because they went back to work in a cooling off period and left 3 workers fired. That's untenable in the labor movement. That should never happen. If they went back and they were going to have a nominal reset, well, if they want to have a reset, then everybody has to go back to work. Well, this is one small example, and that strike is still going on now. That if the rest of labor mobilized and saw the significance of this, because an attack on the warehouse becomes an attack on the longshoremen, and that becomes an attack on a singular critical gain, which was the hiring hall, that bosses don't hire, but the union gets to decide who goes to work. This is a major battle for labor, and it's a wake-up call. So we're in the middle of another battle right now. And our job is to expose the role of the bureaucracy, even if they do some good things, but there is a need in this situation to make a clarion call to the rest of the working class of why they have to mobilize, including the East Coast longshoremen in the ILA. And I don't think it's impossible that this awareness could be made. So this is one example of how things can break loose. And we have a role to play in terms of breaking it loose. Not only the defense case, but actually motivating and supporting workers who will challenge their bureaucracy and get them out of the way if they don't fight, and create a new leadership of the union that wants to fight and wants to win.
For sure. Again, just linking it back to, we've been talking for over 2 hours now. We started with, the historical context. And I think for the last 40 or so minutes, we've been talking about today. But so I'm just thinking about a listener. But I think the link here is how there's a couple of things I see, the struggle against the bureaucracy and how that on a day-to-day basis with the whole policies that they pursue, that doesn't challenge the overall segregated setup in the country. When you're fighting up against bureaucracy, you said, for example, with the Crockett 10, it's the ILW local 10, it's a majority Black local also, So there you see in this country how labor and the Black question really go hand in hand, which brings me back to Jim Robertson's earlier advice to you, some 40 years ago about if you don't get...
Admonition.
Yeah, admonition, sorry. Yeah. If you don't have labor, you don't have the struggle against fascist terror. You don't have a successful struggle. And, you need both sides of the thing.
You do.
And I think that unites these two things together. But why are we talking about the state of the labor movement right now? Because it has implications. More defeats means who's going to get attacked first? It's the most oppressed. It's going to be the Black masses. And the victories are going to uplift those same masses as well. So I think that's kind of the link I'd just like to make clear to our listeners.
Yeah.
Now, to start bringing this to a close, at the introduction I mentioned, so we've been talking about the U.S., but you've said a number of times in this discussion, Don, that this is a reactionary period. And that's not just in this country, that's in a lot of countries now, So back in Britain, there's increasing attacks against minorities. For example, there's Tommy Robinson and his march. Now, that's not it's not a big old fascist march, but it's a lot of right-wing people that, Black and brown people see, and they're like, oh God, what do I, that's messed up. So I guess I would like to end this discussion by asking, because there's a lot of conversation happening in different countries about the anti-racist struggle, the anti-fascist struggle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I think the younger generation of leftists is growing up on. So what would be your snappy advice to those young people today? You guys have literally organized and built and participated in labor bloc mobilizations to beat back the Klan. What do you take from your historical experience and impart in drive-by kind of way to the younger generation?
Study, organize, and be bold when it's necessary. I mean, study the lessons of history. Like Trotsky's writings on the struggle against fascism in Germany is really critical to be armed with a clear-cut understanding of what fascism is and what it isn't, and how to fight it, and the role of the different classes in relationship to the fascist movement. Why the petty bourgeoisie usually attaches its wagon to the bourgeoisie until the working class showed it can be an independent class force as a whole of attraction. It can be won over the lower levels of it. Studies writers on the United Front versus the Popular Front. And so that actually is important, because then you can begin to understand why the sectarianism of the left is so dangerous, even more dangerous today. That's what destroyed the German workers' movement in the 30s. German Communist Party refused to unite with the Social Democratic workers. That opened the road to Hitler. It's not abstract. That's one thing I would say. And the other thing I would say is, no matter where you are, we're part of an international proletarian movement. It's really clear. You can see the depth of the anger around the country. You look at, a party, a youth organization in India calling itself the Cockroach Party, coming off of the infamous swine that originated that term against those who wanted a better education. You can see, they're just the fright, the little struggle they had. It threw a fright into the Modi Hindu nationalist movement. They got scared. So there's people that want to do something. The young people, there's been a lot of youth upheavals around the world. But history is our best teacher, as old Malcolm X used to say, right? So it's our best teacher. And I guess that's what I have to say. And also that the International Communist League, in our recent international conference, have laid down some key programmatic points regarding to why you have to fight to defend the foreign worker state in China, why you have to defend the Cuban Revolution, and why you have to fight to build a party as a tribune of the people that will try to mobilize labor to defend immigrants and women and gays and trans. Otherwise, what are we building? We're just helping improve bourgeois democracy. And that's the death knell. Because that's what I have to say.
Okay. Jane, your advice for anti-racist, anti-fascist fighters for today?
I agree with, I think Don said a lot of what I would want to say, but I would want to emphasize to study history, because you don't step in the same stream twice, and it's not going to replicate itself. But if you study history and the struggles of labor, the struggles against oppression, and how it played out, and what the mistakes were, then you can see how you can apply the need to fight those things today in the current circumstances. And even though it might not be done the same way, and there'll be different factors, that they can apply the same principles, because the same principles are basically there. Because if you study history, it's been a series of one class versus the other, whether you go back to mercantilism or feudalism and then capitalism. Yeah, capitalism has been very resilient, but there is a built-in self-destruction of capitalism. And the Achilles heels are all over the place. The problem is motivating the real power, which is the working class, that can actually overthrow that and turn all of production and all of the achievements of science and knowledge for the benefit of mankind. But if you don't know the history, which includes learning the program, then you are not going to be able to change anything, but you will be inspired by that. And then look to who of the groups today and examine each and every one and see which one has a program that would actually address the way to transform society. And if you don't have a revolutionary orientation of overthrowing capitalism, obviously you're not going to get any place.
No.
But once you make that conclusion, you have to choose which program.
Mhm.
So, as Don said, I think our recent international conference documents, I think, are extremely rich at analyzing the mistakes that have been made by even our forebears in the Trotskyist movement, and points a way very refreshingly to re-examining those things, because things are constantly changing.
Mhm.
But the youth have to see how to apply those lessons of the past to today to transform society.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So, well, coming off of those wise words, I think we will leave it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Um,
2 hours.
so I am planning on making that documentary available to our followers on YouTube because I think it's really cool. You'll get to see Donnie as a young, tall, handsome man.
Oh Lord.
So,
Gonna see a pot-bellied, bald-headed, bespeckled, huh? I should.
but no, I will be making that stuff available. And some articles from the period, just so our listeners can read for themselves. But I want to thank you both for your time and patience, and yeah, I appreciate that.
We did a lot of work on this.
Yeah, we did. I want to dedicate this episode to the memory of our comrades Al Nelson and Ed Cartson, both of whom were key to the success of our 1982 anti-Klan mobilization. Thank you for listening. I will leave you here with the following from some slogans and an excerpt from Al Nelson's speech from November 27th, 1982.
Today in Washington, D.C., the Klan didn't ride, the Klan didn't run, it crawled. It crawled. It ran like a rat back into its hole. This is a victory. Look around you. There are no white sheets. There's only the red banner of the working class. That's the only banner flying here today, but throughout the entire country. This was to be for the KKK nationally, their celebration and their endorsement by the president. They're going to have their biggest victory in 57 years. We gave them their biggest